AJ Storr as well is NBA going. I put testing the NBA because Frank, like you, I saw AJ Storr going to the NBA. I was like, oh, I wonder where he's mocked at. He's not mocked hardly at all. It's not, this is a situation where somebody goes to the NBA and, they figure out what do you work on for your game. And so that's why I originally thought. I was like, well, we'll get on here and we'll talk about how AJ Storr is going to get, information that he needs to go back to school and do this, do that. And then I looked up some more information and found out that AJ Storr wrote like a huge long letter saying goodbye to the Wisconsin fans and like thanking his family and everything, and like the NBA is his dream. And although he didn't mention anything about going into the transfer portal, kind of sounded like, hey, I'm going to go test the NBA waters, and if this doesn't work out, see you, Wisconsin. I'm going somewhere else next year. I'm going to, some other school. He's only a sophomore. So it seems really, really strange to me that you would declare for the NBA draft and stick with it when you're this young, if you're not really being mocked. I suppose he could do really well in testing, but at the end of the day, it just kind of seems like a weird choice. And even if he does just test the NBA waters, I don't know if he's back at Wisconsin next year. Sonny, what are your thoughts?
I think there's very little chance that he comes back to Wisconsin next year. I mean, he talked about in his press conference, the press is kind of baiting him into talking about coming back next year, and he just wouldn't take the bait. I think putting his name into the NBA draft, the plan is essentially just to kind of soften the blow for when he decides to come back. He's another guy who I've heard his name involved with Illinois as kind of like a Terrence Shannon replacement. I've heard his name go out to Kentucky just because Kentucky's got a lot of money and they're going to be very aggressive in trying to perform well in the tournament next year. It's, Calipari, as much as Calipari can be on the hot seat, he's on it now. So yeah, and as Philip brought up, kissing the floor. He's already transferred once. Originally he was an Illinois commit. Then he went to it was St. John's. Then St. John's he went over to Wisconsin. I think this is a guy who enjoyed his experience in Madison, but I think he's trying to maximize what he can get financially. And I think that's just what's most important to him right now. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in a different uniform next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would like for him to stay at Wisconsin because I do think that Greg Gard's job kind of depends on it a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's obviously a really good player. And if you see him go somewhere and do great things, you love to see that for his career. But Frank, your thoughts? I mean, Storr coming back, is he actually going to the NBA? If he does come back, is he with Wisconsin? Your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, so just like you said, I haven't seen him mocked anywhere. I haven't seen his name on any draft boards. I haven't seen any experts projecting him to go either in the first round or the second round. So I was kind of surprised to see that he was entering the draft. I mean, he's a very good player. So again, my immediate thoughts were that he was just going to test the waters, get some feedback, and come back. But that sort of letter was really cryptic. I mean, it was weird, and I'm just now learning that he kissed the floor on senior night in the comments, so that's even weirder. So it seems like the writing may be on the wall that he's not looking to come back to Wisconsin, and he did start out at St. John's, went to Wisconsin, but at what point do you label yourself as a flight risk, so to speak, and that you're gonna throw up some red flags for potential coaches and saying like, hey, you've already been at two schools. And I'll admit, I don't fully understand the transfer rules anymore. I don't understand when you have to sit out, when you don't. At first there was, you can only do it once, and now it's I don't fully understand what all's involved with that anymore. It's extremely complicated these days. But assuming he doesn't have to sit out and he's able to go somewhere and contribute immediately, if he's a guy who's just looking to get the biggest NIL check that he can, and is looking to go to a championship contending team, I think he definitely could do that. I don't see Wisconsin as being the type of program that's going to be okay with that and be willing to play ball, so to speak. So I think for more reason than what we've already talked about, there's it's pretty reasonable to believe that he's probably not going to be back at Wisconsin next season, which is a shame. It's really a big shame. He added an element to that team, or adds an element to that team. I guess he's still on the team. That no one else could really match. We did see some flashes from Blackwell, so I'm feeling good about what I've seen from him. But as Sonny talked about, the floor for Wisconsin next season is looking to be pretty low. And if you remove AJ Storr, it's pretty drastic. Losing Essegian as well. So that's unfortunate for the Wisconsin team if all that we're speculating is true. But I have confidence in Gard, and what they can do in the portal is ultimately gonna dictate what next season looks like for them.
And I will add one thing. When AJ Storr originally committed to the Illini out of high school, he committed to an assistant coach named Chin Coleman. Chin Coleman that offseason, him and Orlando Antigua got hired by John Calipari and are now on the Kentucky staff. So Storr decommitted once our assistant coaches left, went to St. John's. Now the guys he originally committed to when they were at Illinois are now at Kentucky, and Kentucky has a lot of money that they can spend. So that's why that fit kind of makes a little sense.
I didn't know all that. That's good info to have. And as you said, there's a lot of pressure on Kentucky right now to do something in the tournament. And he, as someone who lives in the state of Kentucky, you're right. He is as on the hot seat as much as you can be for being the head coach of Kentucky. Fans are not happy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think he had a meeting and he is coming back, and I saw something out there about how he is declaring to do things different going forward. So I guess that means he's not planning to have a roster full of freshmen every single year, which in the current state of college basketball is probably a good idea. But yeah, that leads me to what you were thinking, Sonny, that, Kentucky would seem like a kind of destination that would be pretty good for him, especially with how John Calipari is able to get guys NBA ready in his system. So it would not be unlikely. Real quick, guys, before we move on and end the show here, Frank, let's go back to you. I mean, Wisconsin next year. No Connor Essegian, no Tyler Wall. He's gone. If AJ Storr is gone, and obviously we can't speculate too much about Chucky Hepburn. However, there are rumblings there. But I do remember him saying something about coming back to Wisconsin. I don't remember if it was the most official thing in the world. But in that situation, Frank, do you have serious concerns about Wisconsin next year, even if they just lose Essegian, Wall, and Storr?
I do, yeah. I mean, Wall adds an element that his craftiness is hard to match. Crowell's been an efficient scorer. Not the most flashy guy, but he's solid, and really, outside of him and Blackwell, and I don't know what's going on with Chucky Hepburn, but if you can't keep those core guys, I'm concerned, honestly, just for the lack of depth. And I mean, yeah, you have some guys in Carter Gilmore and Nolan Winter who did play some this season, but looking more like role players and not necessarily huge contributors. But yeah, I think that with all this that's unfolding with AJ Storr, I'm very concerned for Wisconsin next season. Again, the transfer portal is great in that in these scenarios you can just kind of plug holes, but I think that really there's a lot of pressure on Gard right now to do something big in the portal if everything that's happening with Storr is showing to be correct.
Yeah. Gard needs to go out there and get somebody to make the fans happy, especially with losing some players that they were already happy with, possibly. So, Sonny, your quick outlook on Wisconsin next year if they don't have Storr, Essegian, and obviously Wall.
I mean, it's a similar storyline to what Indiana's going through, because if Gard has a bad start to the year, half the fan base is already ready to move on. And, we have a new AD who obviously made a splash hire in the football department, bringing in Luke Fickell. Maybe the pressure is going to be on him to try to do the same thing with Wisconsin basketball, which, it's a shame. I think Gard is a good coach. And I think a lot of teams and administrations kind of have to look back and see what happens when you get rid of what's a good coach. Like Michigan won 3-4 games this year. The Big Ten is a really tough conference to win basketball games. And so, right now your ceiling might be limited by having Gard, to being third, maybe second place in the conference, but there's not a lot of teams in the country that can win the national championship. And there's a lot of, giveaway that if you hire the wrong guy, that you're doing the same thing 4 years from now, trying to find the right guy. Whereas you have what I consider relatively high floor with Gard in charge.
Yeah. Phillips is the best here. Gard, high floor, low ceiling type of coach, and that's not something that fans are normally too happy with. So they want the high ceiling and just don't get to your floor type of coach.